Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's program. My name is Sydney Friedman, and I am the Digital and Media Director for Untitled Art. Untitled Art Miami Beach is pleased to partner with artists in residence in Everglades, or AIRIE, for another fantastic year. Some of you may remember seeing the Florida-based nonprofit in person at our fair last year, or join the 2019 program featuring AIRIE artists, which is available to stream on our podcast feed. Now, we are thrilled to host another program highlighting the important work AIRIE does through a conversation between artist Rebecca Reeve and AIRIE's executive director, Helen Toomer. Rebecca Reeve is a British multidisciplinary artist based in New York. Working in sculpture, painting, and photography, she produces site-specific temporal works in the natural environment, often using household objects to frame the scene. The landscape and biological rhythms are a source for investigation and perceptual experimentation in her lush photographic works. Helen Toomer is the Executive Director of Artists in Residence in Everglades. She's also the co-founder of Stone Leaf Retreat, an artist's residency and connective space in the Catskill Mountains of New York, focused on supporting women and families, which organizes Upstate Art Weekend. Helen is also the co-founder of Art Mamas Alliance, which happens to be hosting a happy hour with Untitled Art on Friday evening, and we invite you to join and learn more about that program on our fairs page. If you have questions at any time, please submit them using the Q&A function, which you can find below, and we will address them at the conclusion of the conversation. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Helen and Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Thank you for having us, Untitled. I'm Helen. Hi, Becky.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. I'm just gonna screen share for a second to show everybody the beautiful booth that we had at Untitled last year that Sydney just mentioned, with some works by our artists in residence, our past fellows, Dana Levy, Arumi Abbey, Onajide Shabaka, who is actually an artist in residence right now, Magnus Soderman, Christina Peterson, and Brookhart Jonquill, and also there were others, but I just wanted to show you and say thank you, Untitled, for having us again. I also want to say a couple of little thank yous before I start asking Rebecca Reeve some questions. I also want to say thank you so much to the Everglades National Park for being our partners and supporting us, to all of our previous fellows, to our partners, the Knight Foundation, Warhol Foundation, Miami Foundation. We love you, we thank you for your support, and also to all of you for watching. So Rebecca Reeve and I have known each other for, I feel like
lifetime,
100 years. I am a huge fan. I've been lucky to work with Rebecca at Stone Leaf Retreat and also now with AIRIE. And one of the things I want to start off with is that Rebecca has graciously donated 2 beautiful additions to AIRIE. And these are some snapshots in production that I wanted to share with everybody. And they are available on our website. And Rebecca, we thank you so much. Yeah, so I wondered, these are the 2. So Rebecca, do you want to start with your screen share and tell us about your practice?
Yeah. Hang on, guys. Is that full screen? It is, right?
Yes, that is beautiful. So Rebecca, you were an artist in residence at AIRIE in 2012, right?
Yeah, at the end of 2012, going into the beginning of 2013. So it's kind of straggled both months, I guess, but it was for the period of a month. And it was actually the first time that I'd been down to the Everglades, and it was the beginning of all of the work that I've made to date. Yeah.
Wow. And also, could you tell us a little bit, the edition, the number 56 of Marjorie's World? You said it was one of the first images that you took?
Yeah, I can't remember which number is which, but the one with the striped curtains, that was actually the very first picture that I made in the series, and the two pictures that I've given to AIRIE, they're both pictures that I haven't released as images before, so AIRIE has the exclusivity on those, and I don't normally or ever make the pictures in that smaller size that you have, so it's a very special size, and it's an edition, each picture is an edition of 50, so only AIRIE has those pictures.
Thank you. We love you for that. And also we're so excited because you are coming back for one of our alumni residencies. So you are coming back to the Everglades in February of next year. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, it seemed a while away, but all of a sudden it's just around the corner. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'll be down there for February. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit towards the end of the presentation, share more there. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. So tell us about Marjorie's world.
Okay, right. Oh, wait, oops. Sorry. It's not clicking. Oh, wait. Okay, now it is. Do you still see the side tiles? Sorry, guys. You do.
It's okay. It's a glorious picture of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas there. Style icon, environmental icon, Everglades icon, fabulosity.
Yeah. So Marjorie's world is named after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who was an American journalist, author, and conservationist. She was a staunch advocate of the Everglades and defended against the efforts to drain it and reclaim it for development. She died in 1998 at the age of 108, and The Independent in London wrote in her obituary that in the history of the American environmental movement, there have been few more remarkable figures than Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So her most influential book was The Everglades River of Grass, written in 1947, which actually redefined the popular conception of the Everglades as a treasured river instead of a worthless swamp. And the Everglades was actually made a national park in 1947. Yeah, I wonder if I can do that like that. Yeah. So the requirement of the AIRIE residency, which I did in 2013, was to make work about the Everglades in some way. The Everglades is the third largest national park in the United States after Death Valley and Yellowstone, and is the largest tropical wilderness in the US, comprising 1.5 million acres. It's a network of wetlands and forests fed by a river flowing 1/4 of a mile a day out of Lake Okeechobee, southwest into Florida Bay. So all of my pictures were made along the red route there. I'm going to show you with the arrow, which is Route 9336 that you see on this map. So the artist accommodation was right at the top, near to Royal Palm, and I would drive up and down to Flamingo, which is the bottom there, and it's about a 40-mile drive. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay, so the entire park has a maximum elevation of about 8 feet. So it was a real challenge to make images of a topography that is so relentlessly flat. Just before I started the residency, I was watching a documentary released in 2012 by director Grant Gee, a British director, called Patience After Siebold. And W.G. Siebold has become a very important figure for contemporary artists. And the documentary uses his book, The Rings of Saturn, as its template, tracing the author's account of a walk through Suffolk, and includes the reference to a 1600s ritual in Holland, detailed in Sir Thomas Browne's Pseudodoxica Epidemica, where during the wake of the deceased, it was customary to cover all the mirrors, landscape paintings, and portraits in the home with cloths. They believed it would make it easier for the soul to leave the body and subdue any temptations for it to stay in this world. And I thought that it was such a beautiful notion of the soul. And it made me think about how landscape has always touched us throughout the centuries. And it's such a primal expression. And I think this is what led me to think about framing the landscape in this way, instead of covering the landscape views to reveal them, to create these portals. Okay, sorry guys, this is a bit Yeah, so I just thought I would include these coffee stained pages from my notebook, which I came across not too long ago, because it shows how I was mapping and planning my shots as I went. And mapping and gridding is also an important consideration in my work. All of the Marjorie's World pictures are shot with film, so I couldn't look back through while I was shooting. And you can see how I was playing with form and the parameters of how many variations one can make within the square.
I love seeing your drawings, and then the action picture of you taking it, and then
so basic.
No, it's great to see the process, and then you see this and you're like, oh, gorgeous.
Showing my anyway, so I wanted to show this picture first because it was the very first picture that I made in the Marjorie's World series, and the one that I've given to AIRIE is one of those from that sequence. It was at dawn. We drove out into the dark before sunrise with the ironed curtains in the back, and I had no idea if the concept was even going to work in terms of an image. And I set it up and I waited for the sunrise, and the entire field of grass turned to gold. And it was such a special moment and a defining one, because I knew then that the concept was going to work. And this was the start of a new series. So yeah. So I've been spending a lot of time reading John O'Donoghue's writings in his book, The Inner Landscape of Beauty. And he considers landscape as an important pivotal word in terms of how human beings know themselves and move through the world. That if you go towards it with an open heart and a real watchful reverence, you will absolutely be amazed at what it will reveal to you. How landscape recalls you into a mindful mode of stillness, of solitude, and of silence, where we can truly receive time. And he's talking about the purity of presence and also the inner human landscape, the invisible world, which is constantly intertwining with what we can know and see. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. And I feel like that's even, I mean, that's been relevant forever, but it feels even more so now in the current climate, and with, you know, COVID and being separated from our loved ones, and feeling a connection and a solace really in the natural environment that we must protect, right?
So I've bought all of the curtains that I use in these pictures. I've bought in charity shops in the areas where I'm working. So there's this immediate social history embedded into the fabric itself. I think it's been a way for the viewers to more easily connect with the scene beyond, and that as a society, we're becoming increasingly detached from the natural world with our pace of life. And O'Donoghue talks about time as the enemy of modern life. When you slow down, then you find your rhythm. And when you come into rhythm, then you come into a different kind of time. That there are all these different zones within us. And if you slip beneath the surface, like going beneath the ocean, that things become more still and more silent, and you get more present.
Love that, Becky.
Thanks. So I was listening to an interview which John O'Donoghue gave shortly before his death, where he talked about his time as a priest, and I'm quoting now, and how it was an amazing thing that you would see somebody who would be dying over a period of a week, and who had lived a hard life where they were hard and tight and unyielding, and everything had to err on its way to their center. And suddenly you would see that within 3 or 4 days, you would allow them to loosen. You would see them loosen, and you'd see a kind of buried beauty that they'd never allowed themselves to enjoy surface and bring a radiance to their face. It surfaced because suddenly there was a recognition that the time was over, and that their way of being could no longer help them with this, and that another way of being was being invited from them. And when they yielded to it, it would become transformative, meaning that when you change time levels, that something can transform incredibly quickly, that's the secret of change, that there are huge gestations and fermentations going on in us that we are not even aware of. And then sometimes when we come to a threshold, crossing over which we need to become different, that we are able to do it. And it's this notion of transitioning a threshold that my work touches upon with these portals, the spiritual experience in the landscape, and this deep feeling of release. And similarly in Siebold's The Rings of Satin, the book that I was inspired by, which starts by inviting you to imagine what it feels like to suddenly be released from something.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got nothing else other than wow.
But I think that the images in this series are also about the strangeness of being human. An image such as this one is absolutely about a complicated, frustrated, and entangled reality. And actually, this is one of my favorite images. It was really tricky to make because I was really worried about disturbing snakes, and there are 4 deadly species in the Everglades, but I managed it. Yeah.
I love this one too. Yeah.
So there are 9 distinct habitats in the park, and I tried to make pictures in all of the habitat. And for days I was driving along looking at these little tree hills in the distance, which I thought were convex, but they are actually concave. It happens where the limestone substrate has given way to circular solution holes. And it's a cluster of cypress trees with the tallest in the middle, hence their name, Cypress Domes. And it's like going into a hidden world. And this is where this picture was made knee deep in black water, and they call this slough slogging. So I just thought that I'd include that.
I love that. So I've seen
Okay.
images of previous AIRIE fellow Christina Peterson's in that environment too. And Valerie Ricordi, who is our EPIC board president, is taking a bunch of AIRIE supporters slough slogging in a couple of weeks. So and I'm sure she's going to want to take you too, Becky, in February.
It's so cool. I so enjoyed it. I'd really like to go back and do some more. Yeah, so you can see in the distance there the domes that I photographed inside that I was talking about. And then here are just some more pictures that I made during the residency. And so I was really struck by a passage which I read the other day by British writer Robert Macfarlane, who observed that the British tradition of walking is of recovery, and that the American tradition of walking is of discovery, and that striding into the oncoming air of the world. The British romantic tradition is a way to strip away the accretions of civilization and return yourself to some original state. And I guess it made me think about my methodology and see that there's been a duality inherent in my practice, that there's an element of both of these aspects in my work. I'm British, but I've lived for many years now, you know, in the United States. And after the Everglades, such a lush, wet topography, I decided that I wanted to go to a landscape that was void of water, that was arid, white, ethereal, and heaven-like in a way. And so I went to Utah, specifically the Bonneville Salt Flats. The deserts of the American West are so rich historically with the pioneering land art movement. And of course, near to the Salt Flats are works such as Smithson's Spiral Jetty. This is a really low res image from a really old phone, but I wanted to include it because, you know, it puts the landscape in perspective again. And there are such vast expanses of landscape out there, something, of course, that you don't have in England. And I remember thinking at this very spot that this is what they are referring to when they talk about God's country. You know, the sheer vastness of it, it's so majestic, it's quite breathtaking. And of course, this was the picture that was made at that.
Wow, I love being able to see that scale, and of course, I totally identify being, you know, an expat.
I mean, there are vast landscapes, but it's a different vast.
Yeah, vast, like this kind of vast instead of like, vast, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's, but yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. This is one that I've just released. I hadn't shown it before. So the 14th century German mystic Meister Eckhart says, there is a place in the soul that neither time nor space nor no created thing can touch. And what it means is that there's a place in you where you have never been wounded, where there is still a sureness and a confidence and a tranquility. And I think the intention of prayer and spirituality is now and again to visit that inner sanctuary. And similarly, I think the simple act of going out into nature taps into that spiritual experience. And again, the purity of presence. Agnes Martin talks about 2 parts of the mind, the intellect, the servant of the ego, and how one must practice emptying it to quieten it. That you have to practice quiet, empty mind, or else you are never going to find out the truth about life. You have to go slower and slower and then stop. And then your mind is at rest. And then you have to not try hard. She said that the best was when she was looking for the truth. She said that the best was when she was looking for the truth and she found out the best way was to just look around. You don't see anything, but just be in the mood for truth. And it's a happy state of mind. And then you stay alert and then it just comes into your mind what to do. Sometimes you have to wait a long time for an answer, for an inspiration, but it comes. And I think for me, going out into these landscapes is a way for me to feel fully present and to fill my mind with nothing but what is around me. And it feels very much like a communion with nature on many levels.
Yeah, I love that, Becky. Also, like being in the mood for truth, like that
Yeah.
kind of like resonates too. And I think that's what's so powerful about your work is that you do connect, the viewer connects with this environment and feels a sense of belonging and also just, you know, wanting to be there. I certainly feel that with your work. And one question I did want to ask you is just how important, you've referenced a lot of writers and artists and their writings. How important is it to you to read all of this, to take this all in and to share it? Because you're very well read and you're very articulate.
I don't know about that. Thank you. But I mean, you know, I think as an artist, it's a very solitary life. And I think certainly with the work that I'm doing, I have to go and find the answers myself, and it's through my lived experience. And so to read and watch, you know, say for example, Agnes Martin. I mean, I even named my daughter after Agnes Martin. She's such an inspiration in terms of her commitment and, you know, her endeavor. I really think that, you know, for me anyway, like my practice is very much a soulful endeavor. My spiritual practice and my art practice is one and the same, and one informs the other and back and forth. So I take great comfort in hearing, because there's so much work to be done and our lives are so short, and other people can help you with those answers to a degree and point you in the right direction. So yeah.
You're very articulate again, Becky.
So this diptych is actually on the San Andreas Fault. So make of that what you will. But Martin talks about beauty being a representation of perfection in life. How beauty is the mystery of life. It's not in the eye, it's in the mind. And it's because of the awareness of perfection in the mind and how we see perfection, and then we see beauty and that they're different. You look at the sky and it's perfect. And then you look further and it's beautiful, and you enter into it in a way. Beauty illustrates happiness. And I'm quoting her now. She says, "The wind in the grass, you know how happy the grass looks and the shiny waves following each other. A blue sky is a different kind of happiness than the dark night, a different kind. And there are an infinite number of different kinds of happiness, all illustrated by beauty. You look around and you see it on all sides." And O'Donoghue talked about how the human soul does not really hunger for beauty, but that we feel most alive in the presence of what is beautiful, and that it returns us in fleeting moments to our highest selves. And it's been such a rewarding experience to make this work. And I hope that others are able to share it in a way when they're looking at the pictures that I've made. Yeah. So that's like the end of the Marjorie's World. And then I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Through Looking series. So from the Marjorie's World series, I went on to make a second body of work, which I call Through Looking. From the organic lines of the fabric, I started working with a more rigid linear method using Venetian blinds, and I painted them on plein air. And you can see here, looking at a number of them together, the color variations in response to the natural environment. So I make a lot of these pictures in one specific spot in upstate New York, just outside of Woodstock. But I did a residency in 2016 in Joshua Tree National Park, and I made a series of blind pictures there as well. And you can see how the topography and the quality of light affects the choice of colors. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed working with the grid. It imparts a democratic character to the composition, and it activates the scene in a different way. I studied as a painter, and there was always an awareness and emphasis on the edge of the canvas. And I think that this consideration comes through in my photographic work as well. So the history of this lake is that it was a place where the women in the Indian tribes would go to sing their histories. And I always think that there's definitely some kind of energy that you pick up on when you're there. You've been there, Helen.
Yes, I've been there with you, and I feel that too. It's a magical place.
Yeah. So I'm just going to scroll through now to show some more examples. You know, how I've been playing with the optical effects and the effect of the light and the shadow, burning one's eyeballs, and the movement of light, you know, throughout the day, something else that's been of interest. And something that really struck me in Joshua Tree was the monumentality of it all, you know, the insignificance of us as humans in the landscape, and endless time, which was an awesome feeling, and something that you don't ever forget. So I just thought I'd put a quote by John O'Donoghue, because I think it's a true explanation of that feeling, how we are all one and the same. Nature coaxes us deeper inwards, teaching us to rest in the serenity of our elemental nature. When we go out among nature, clay is returning to clay. We are returning to participate in the stillness of the earth which first dreamed us. And I think that this idea gave birth to the evolving of the Looking Through series, you know. So I've returned again and again to this spot. Really, the majority of the pictures in this series have been made at this very spot, which is what, 20 feet across. And it's been like watching the earth breathe throughout the seasons. And I guess with the change of the seasons, with the breakdown and then regeneration, it's informed my work in a new way. In 2017, I started cutting and deconstructing the blinds. I'm cutting them to a point where they didn't exist, where there was just a trace. And there's a perfection in the grid of the blinds. One wants to look through it. The horizontal line is more inviting than the vertical, that perfect gradation of line. There's something really pleasing about it. And then as you begin to cut, there's a fear and a release. And I never know how it's going to take form. And I try to do it as quickly as possible and not get too precious, too attached, you know, with it being, it is what it is. And that's a discipline. But even in my relationship to the cuts, that's changed. You know, it's like life, like you can get too precious about things. So the Agnes Martin show at the Guggenheim in 2017 was a really powerful experience for me. And, you know, as I said, I even named my daughter after Agnes Martin. And I started to really pare down the palette in the work and get even quieter, and the white on white, bone-like almost. And I started to see the importance of the center line that ran through the images. It became like a heartbeat, like a cardiac rhythm. And no two series have ever been the same. You know, it's like life really. Each day, each moment is transitory. And the series of paintings titled The Islands by Agnes Martin, which were in the show, the Guggenheim show, these were the inspiration really for this work, you know, using the scrim to really behind, so it was 2 layers through the landscape. Yeah.
I'm just nodding because they're beautiful. I love being able to look at
there's
it.
Something, yeah, it's just like the symmetry of it too. It's people really respond to that.
Well, it's also strange because there's such a push-pull between the fact that there's something unnatural in a natural landscape, but it works.
Yeah, the curtains, all of the curtains were shot with film, as I said, and they're a square format, and it's all natural light. I never flash. Whereas with these, it's all digital. And I do use flash. I mix the flash with the ambient light, and I want to have that, the shadowing, the traces, because it's a little bit, it messes things up a little bit more, and I find that interesting. So ideally, these images would be viewed in an immersive way at pretty much one-to-one scale, so that you're surrounded by this cycle. But that, of course, takes space. So I haven't actually. We did one at yours. That was the first time I've printed them pretty much one-to-one scale, and I really enjoyed seeing it.
Yeah,
all the time.
I love that. Yeah, we're really lucky. We have like a huge Rebecca Reeve just literally outside, and it's, yeah, you get to look at it, and it's be able to feel like you can walk into it, and it's an absolute joy to be able to look at like every day. And it's interesting because when Eric and I were talking about kind of like which work, and we were like, well, maybe it should be like an Everglades work or like a Joshua Tree work, like something different, because obviously, you know, Cooper Lake is just down the road from us, but having it there, it's like there's something incredibly powerful and beautiful about it. And also I'm getting really excited, we should mention as well that you're going to be having some work at the AIRIE Nest Gallery, and we're going to be blowing up an image, which so visitors are going to be able to experience kind of like the one-on-one and want to walk into it, which I'm very excited about.
Is it going to be there when I go down there in February? How long is it going on for?
Yes, it's going to be there. It's going to be there, Becky. Absolutely.
So this summer, I've been working largely with black blinds, and I realized that I think it's the fallout from the pandemic experience, that I've gone black, quite funereal in a sense, but not, well, I've started not flashing these, and so it becomes more just like a negative space, which I find interesting. Like the lines in this, you can see the natural light is bouncing off the curve of each blind, and you know, when this is a bit larger on everyone's screens, I guess it's harder to see, but you know, you're looking through, and then you've got this pushback from the white line throughout it's kind of, you know, it's a lot more optical, I guess, a lot more than, well, not as soft as the white on white. Yeah, let's go to the next. Yay. So again, I've been working in sequence, but I think that it's interesting that the images have come to this point because it seems to be a direct mirror of what initially inspired me to make the Marjorie's World series, the passage in the Rings of Saturn. And I'm going to read it because I realized looking at these pictures that there really was this direct connection the other day. So it occurs to me that at one time, the only acceptable expression of profound grief for ladies of the upper classes was to wear heavy robes of black silk taffeta or black crepe de chine. And Sir Thomas Browne, who was the son of a silk merchant and may well have had an eye for these things, remarks in a passage of the Pseudodoxica Epidemica that in the Holland of his time, it was customary in a home where there had been a death to drape black mourning ribbons over all the mirrors and all canvases depicting landscapes or people or the fruits of the field, so that the soul, as it left the body, would not be distracted on its final journey, either by a reflection of itself or a last glimpse of the land, now being lost forever. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, the light catching the blinds there, like, you know, this passage of time, even when I'm doing the sequencing, you know, from the start to the end of the image, you know, it was a cloudy sunset, and then it broke through the clouds and it just hit the blinds, and the black edges there turned to gold. And, you know, you can't foresee those things. Like making these pictures, it really is a leap of faith because you can't argue with the wind. You can't argue with, you know, the natural elements, and it can be tremendously frustrating sometimes. Like the grid has to be perfect. You know, the lines have to marry perfectly with the horizontal, the horizon on the edge of the water there on that lake. And I've done it, you know, so many times, but it's always a practice, and it doesn't always work. You know, even though the water level, because this is a reservoir as well, even the water levels change. So it's never like a set fast formula. There's always things that you have to factor in.
Yeah, you're in a constant relationship and trying to navigate what the environment is giving you in that moment. Like I know that when you've been up here at Stoneleaf, it's like the wind has just changed or something's happened, right? And you're like, you know, or it's It's so difficult.
And the forecast with COVID, all of the weather forecasts have got a lot less accurate. So, you know, like when you go on these trips, like you do have to do some planning, and so you are, you know, pretty reliant on the weather forecast as to whether, you know, it's not possible. I mean, I'll make pictures in any conditions other than wind, because I mean, with the curtains it's easier. You want them sometimes to lift up and, you know, and have a life of their own, but you really don't want that with the blinds. And when I'm doubling, you know, when I'm using that scrim, that really does act as a sail. And normally I'm making the pictures on my own. I don't normally have an assistant, so, you know, yeah, it can be a bit challenging. Anyway, it's a life lesson. So this leads me to a closing note to what I'm going to be starting exploring on the residency at the Everglades in February, the circular form. And I had a custom blind made in England and shipped out to me here, and I'm going to be using that down in the Everglades. And this picture is from a temple interior in Kyoto, which I found the other day. And interestingly, in Japanese culture, the circular window is called the window of spiritual enlightenment. And in contrast, the rectangular window is called the window of bewilderment. And they say that the rectangle shape expresses a human's life. The four corners of the rectangle expresses four pains that people cannot avoid in their lives. So to be born, to get old, to get sick, and to die.
Wow.
And yeah, the circle represents an innocent figure without prejudices. So we'll be exploring this circular form, and I'm excited about that because I've been working with the square since 2012, and the rectangle, I guess, since 2015, something like that. So yeah, I'm going to see anyway if I can do some things with this circular form. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. That's gonna be amazing. Have you got any places, kind of like specific places, because you showed us so many beautiful moments in the Everglades, that you are really looking to return to?
Well, like I said, I'd really like to do that sluice logging, but you know, you know, with the curtains, you can roll those up and put them around a tube and then carry them in on your back, kind of thing. But the circular one is completely rigid. It doesn't fold down. You know, it's in a really big crate. So that's not going to work for that, I don't think. Although who knows? Like maybe I can set something up and maybe I can make it happen. I don't know. Like I think, you know, you have to stay quite open to things as and when, you know, you're right in it. But in terms of landscape, I think what I'd really like to do is explore a bit more, you know, the lusciousness of the Everglades in terms of the foliage. I think that's where I'd like to start. I don't feel that I want to explore so much the vastness of it, that sense of vastness that I've described in a lot of my pictures. More the, you know, the palms, the palm fronds with the curtains that I said were quite claustrophobic and complicated and messy, metaphor for my life, I guess. You know, I think I'd like to start there with this and go out. I mean, I've done another body of work that I didn't include in this called sun breathing, where instead of painting the objects, I actually took the object away and just started painting the plants. That's on my website. You can see that if anyone's interested. Using a chalk spray, I covered the plants with that. So I guess I'd like to go there. Yeah, and thinking about it, like the whole notion of binary, like this breathing in, breathing out, that was very much a concern and consideration with the sun breathing work. And I guess, you know, the circular form goes back literally into that binary concept. So yeah, maybe that's where it's going to go. I don't know. I guess everyone will see on the other side of February. Yeah.
It's exciting. And also I should say, like the chalk paints are friendly to the plants.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And I remember going down here at Stoneleaf one day and just seeing like a field of blue fern.
I came out looking like a Smurf. I couldn't work out why everyone was looking at me strangely, and then I saw myself in the mirror. I'm like, shit, I look completely blue. Got it everywhere. Yeah.
Oh, bless. Well, I've got some other questions, but I wanted to say, if there are any questions, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A for Rebecca here. I actually wanted to ask you because I think I fully didn't realize what a big kind of influence Agnes Martin. I mean, you've talked about the show and then obviously Aggie, but it also makes
me. Did you know that? Did you know that I called Aggie after Agnes Martin?
You told me once before, but it's just kind of making me laugh because Aggie is a strong-willed little human. And when I think about Agnes Martin, I think about serenity and I think about minimalism. And so I love the fact that your daughter is this like strong world force. And I wondered whether, I wondered if your practice had changed or adjusted since having Aggie, because obviously you talked about like time and being at one with nature. And one thing I know as a mother, your time gets condensed. Sorry, that's a big question.
It's a really big question. And, I guess I was even thinking this morning, just when you have a child, you're so in the thick of it. I'm a single parent as well, so I have even less time. It's like really, really intense for me. And, if I don't have her she stayed last night away at the nanny's so that, I could prep. And even then I was walking on the street today, just that chance of being able to get a more perspective on everything is huge. I think, some artists say, it's made me a better artist. I don't know, like what is she, 21, 22 months? That's really not very long. I mean, has it taught me resilience? Yes. Has it taught me patience? Yes. How was the birthing experience? Mind-blowing. There's so many things that I think have just been so overwhelming that it's hard for me to even get perspective on it. But I will say that if I have always made, and the more I get involved in my practice and commit to my practice, the more I understand that it's just something that comes through me and that I make to give and to share with others. There's no ownership on it. And I guess since I've had Aggie, I make the work for us, and I do it for her. And I guess that's the sacred role of a mother, of a parent, yeah.
I love that. I love the fact that she's going to see what you're making and creating and know that you made it for her, for you,
yeah.
both. That's magic. We have a question. You mentioned how the weather can dictate the way your photographs evolve. We're wondering if your first AIRIE residence was also in February and how you're preparing for the different weather.
I know that December, January time is a good time. I actually haven't researched what the weather is like in February. I'm assuming that it's nice. It's certainly not, the dog days of summer. So am I preparing for that? Was that the question? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. How are you preparing for the different weather?
I think I think you have to be prepared for everything. You're not going to be in the Arctic. It's not going to be like -50, but
climate change, who knows at the moment.
Well, that's what I'm talking about with no snow up here. I need snow. I want to finish this set of pictures that I've been making. But how am I preparing? I just have to cover all bases, I guess, is the answer to that. And, I guess I've learned over all these years I've been making the pictures that it's invariably never going to be as you think it's going to be. So make sure that you're organized.
Right. I think I'm less worried about the weather for you and more about the alligators, because Tracy Robertson Carter, who's going to be our new board president in 2021, sent me a video of the largest alligator I've ever seen in my life. So I wondered how you've talked a lot about like the natural environment, but what about animals?
Yeah, well, I think, you do have to be a bit careful making the pictures. I make the pictures along the side of the road. The nice thing about the national parks in America, sorry, is that most of them, they have drives where you could go and then stop at a viewing point, or, you can come off the trail a bit, but they're quite accessible. So, like I said, I drive up and down that red route. So normally I just pull over on the side of the road, and that's where the snakes like to bathe in the sunshine. So I, you know, when I'm down there, I remember sort of making a bit of a noise so that I disturbed, you know, like that normally happens with most things. You know, I remember when I was scuba diving a while ago, I was in the Turks and Caicos, and the divers went back to the boat, and I had air in my tank, and so I continued the dive with this instructor, and we were diving at this drop off. And we were just lying there at the bottom, just breathing, just chilling, just seeing, because at the drop-offs, you know, you get a lot of big fish coming up from the deep, and we were just seeing if there was anything interesting that we would see. And all of a sudden, it was like a cartoon. I saw out of the corner of my eye this enormous black shadow moving its way along the line of the drop-off, and I could feel my head go, duk, 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 what? And I actually shrunk, like I didn't have anything to hide under. I just shrunk because I just couldn't believe the enormity of this frigging huge shark. And I touched the instructor, and I was just like, it's huge, the biggest shark I'd ever seen. And then she saw it, and it was just swimming so slowly and just cruising along, and it was right opposite us. And then as we gently lifted up off the bottom, just so gently, as soon as it saw us move, it disappeared in a fraction of a second. And so, you know, I mean, I don't ever want to see anything that big under the water again. But in terms of, you know, this whole thing, we build up these big things. Of course, you have to be careful, but you know, these things that are very dangerous, invariably they're just as scared of us as we are of it, and they want to get out of the way. So I guess I'm not super scared.
That was very calm. That massive shark. I think I would have freaked out and then been eaten. So
that was pretty terrifying. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question from Meredith. You described your spiritual practice and your art practice as one and the same. Could you talk a little bit more about this, please?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's a really big question. But I guess
kind of like a very Zen person, like when you're talking about your work, but then I also know the other side
of me. I mean, like, we're all a work in practice, you know. I've got a huge number of like big black crosses, but I'm trying, and we're all a work in progress. You know, I think you know, I've done a lot of traveling. I've lived all over the world. I was really fortunate that in my mid-20s, I went to Nepal for about 3 months, and I did 3 treks in the Himalayas, and that was a profoundly moving experience for me. And on, you know, a deeply spiritual level, I had experiences with tears running down my eyes in temples, and I didn't even know why I was crying. You know, walking along with these sadhus down these vast, you know, Himalayan river beds, just insane magical things that happened. And during that time as well, I did a Vipassana meditation retreat. I actually did it in New Zealand, and I've gone on to do a number of those since. I find it really difficult. I don't meditate every day, but you know, I guess physically the hardest thing that I've ever done, although I guess giving birth like is on par with that now. Like doing the Himalaya trek was physically so challenging. It was, one of them was a 3-week trek. It was so grueling, and you know, you push yourself to the limits. And it inspires you to do more. And my midwife said, you know, whenever mothering gets hard, you know, remember this, remember what you did, and draw upon that, you know. And so I would say the same again of the Vipassana, is that it's, you know, mentally, psychologically, it was a tremendously challenging thing to do, although I think everyone should do it. And so I guess that elements of that, I mean, have informed every part of my life since, and continue to. And I guess that's why I resonate so deeply with Agnes, because that's what she talks about. And, you know, people like John O'Donoghue as well. So yes, that it gets very binary. It's, you know, I mean, the Vipassana tradition goes back thousands of years. And it's something that is such a, you know, if we're going to talk about truth, is fundamental to us human beings. Yeah, the breath. Yeah.
Wow, I think that's I think that's a
That
good,
makes any sense.
Zen moment is a good moment to end on. I mean, I want to talk to you all day. I'm probably just going to call you after this and put on the kettle and have a cup of tea. But I wanted to say thank you, and Sydney's back. Hi, Sydney.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Helen and Rebecca, for such an enlightening and engaging conversation. I am so taken by the work. I can't wait to dive more into it. And I was so happy to, have this panel as a great introduction. To everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us. And I encourage you all to visit the 9th edition of Untitled Art Miami Beach, which is now open online through Sunday. And the week is also packed with more conversations. As I mentioned, Helen has her happy hour with the Art Mamas on Friday night, which hopefully will bring a little IRL Miami spirit everywhere. And of course, if you want to revisit this conversation, it will be archived on the Untitled Art Facebook page, so you could check it out at any time. And please feel free to reach out to the fair if you have any further questions. And thank you both again, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thanks, Becky. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.